as we exit the final home game weekend of the 2019 season for the Alabama Crimson Tide, we need to recap the recruiting weekend that was in Tuscaloosa, and joining us to do that right now, my colleague there at BamaOnline.com, Hank South, who does an outstanding job covering Crimson Tide recruiting. Hank, welcome to the program.
Hey, what's going on, Travis?
I'm doing pretty good, my man. So let's get started. And we know things are subject to change even up until the start of a weekend, but from an official visitor standpoint, give us a little rundown of the prospects and I guess Alabama commitment among them already that the Crimson Tide hosted over the weekend.
Right, yeah, they had three guys on campus for Western Carolina over the weekend. One of them was a junior college cornerback named Ronald Williams, who they recently offered back in October, and he was taking his first visit of his recruitment to Tuscaloosa on an official. He was in town, left yesterday. By all accounts, I talked to people that were around him. I talked to him a little bit. Sounds like it went really well. Obviously, the Bama offer was big for him, getting it back in October, and has been one he's been considering pretty heavily, along with like Texas A&M, Kentucky. I know Auburn offered him as well. So he's got some SEC programs coming after him, but I think Bama took a step forward for him this weekend, and we'll have more on him on BamaOnline.com later today. The Alabama commitment, another defensive back, Jaquez Robinson, hasn't been a lot of concern about where his commitment has stood with Alabama. He actually somewhat formally, I guess, shut down his recruitment last month, that he wasn't going to take any more visits. He hasn't taken any more visits. Still talking to a few schools, but he's pretty locked in with Alabama, and I think this visit solidified that even more. And then last but not least, one of their tight end targets, J.J. Pegues, out of Oxford, Mississippi, was back on campus for his third visit this fall, this time on an official. He wrapped things up. If it's not already over, he's wrapping it up right about now and heading home. He got in on Saturday, so he had that 48-hour stay through today. So we'll have more from him as well, but definitely, some notable guys on campus, and definitely a good game for them to kind of see Bama put it all on display.
So a somewhat limited official visitor list, but from an unofficial visitor perspective, any particular names of note, Hank, that made their way to Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, there's a few. Obviously, this wasn't any sort of LSU-type weekend or even Tennessee or Arkansas from back in October. But, I think the most notable 2020 unofficial visit was Jahmyr Gibbs, the four-star running back from Georgia. This was his second time on campus. Here's another guy that was offered this fall. He's had a really strong senior season. He's going to come back for an official visit, or he plans to, at least next month. He's still committed to Georgia Tech at this point, but programs like Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, they're also talking to him. It's not really clear. We haven't really seen a huge push from Bama yet as far as adding that third back in the class, especially since they're still recruiting guys like Jason McClellan at the same position. So we'll see. It's kind of a wait-and-see mode with him, it appears. A big 2021 unofficial visitor, Carrion Arnold, who's a new defensive back target they have, that they recently offered about a week ago from Tallahassee, 6'2", 187. Guy had just a crazy junior season, both sides of the ball. Just a really productive player. And it's pretty clear he's at the top of their board. Nick Saban even told him that this weekend when they sat down together. So those are probably the two, as far as the 2020 and 2021 class, those are probably the two biggest names on an official visit.
It is Iron Bowl week, and we are talking with Hank South, recruiting analyst for BamaOnline.com on Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. And with it being Iron Bowl week, Hank, and understanding that this 2020 class is getting very, very tight on numbers, is there still an Alabama-Auburn battle or two that is playing out as we approach the early signing period?
Yeah, I'll actually give you three. The biggest one as of late that we've seen kind of develop a little bit more in the last few weeks is Javion Cohen, the big four-star offensive tackle from Phoenix City. He was actually expected this past weekend on campus. I think the 11 a.m. kick kind of hurt his efforts in getting there. on time. So he actually missed this visit, but he's expected back for an official visit next month or on December 6th through 8th. So Bama's right in the thick of things there. He's definitely, not reconsidering things with Auburn, but he's definitely mulling over Alabama and potentially making a change. So, maybe we'll see some movement there here in the next few weeks. Philip Webb, Alabama's last remaining linebacker target, at least at this point. It's pretty much a three-team race there between Alabama, LSU, and Auburn. A lot of people think LSU kind of has the upper hand at this point, but Auburn's been seen as a favorite at one point in his recruitment. Alabama's been in there, so that's another battle. And then last but not least, the big defensive tackle target for both programs with Alabama and Auburn, and that's McKinley Jackson from Mississippi. And that he's a guy that's visited Bama twice this fall already. He's visited several times throughout his recruitment, and he's from Mississippi. He's the state's top player in Mississippi, but it kind of seems like this is an Alabama-Auburn type battle kind of as we approach February when he's going to make a decision. Texas A&M is recruiting him real hard too, and they're a real contender there. But Alabama and Auburn have both been two consistent teams he's considered throughout the recruiting process. So it is a limited availability left in this class as far as spots, but there's certainly some Iron Bowl battles to watch play out.
Once we get through the early signing period next month, Hank, how many slots do you anticipate still being open as Alabama then moves into the new year and looking ahead to the February date?
Yeah, I think this is the third year the early signing period is taking place, and I think this is probably going to be one of the least dramatic we've seen with current Alabama commitments. I think. Most, if not all, there's a couple guys that aren't going to sign early, but the majority plan to sign early and end things. So the class is going to be pretty full, and obviously, you have to have a couple spots probably to stay open for guys like McKinley Jackson, unless of course he decides to go ahead and sign early and make a commitment. But there's going to be other guys that they're recruiting that opt to take it to the February signing period, like. Keyshawn Boutte, he's committed to LSU, but he said he's not signing until February. If Bama doesn't have that wide receiver slot filled, he could be a guy that needs a spot open for, even an Arian Smith, another major wide receiver target as well. So, I don't know exactly how many, but you got to think at least one or two.
Talking with Hank South, recruiting analyst for BamaOnline.com. And I know right now, Hank, you have available to BOL subscribers an update on Taiu Jones-Bell, the South Florida playmaker, who I get the sense, Hank, might be the next in line when you talk about dynamic offensive performers like a Jalen Waddle, like these wide receivers that we've seen the last few years. Is that kind of how you would sum up Jones-Bell?
Oh, definitely. He's a big play wide receiver, probably one of the best at that in the 2020 class. Top 100 guy. I know a lot of guys that are very, very high on Taiu Jones-Bell and have been throughout this whole recruiting process. He's a really quiet kid. He kind of just lets his actions speak for him. But I talked to his mom, and it was a great interview speaking with her and kind of getting her thoughts on this whole recruiting process and how it's kind of played out. And, obviously I asked her about their thoughts on Bryce Young and getting him on board, obviously, getting arguably the top player in the country and Bryce Young to have throw the ball to you. And she said they were really excited. Taiu actually had his mom sit down and watch Bryce's highlights the night that Bryce committed to Alabama. And it's a really cool story, kind of getting their insight into it. I encourage anyone to go check it out if they want to see that. But, she talked about how it's not really as much football with Alabama and their kind of in Taiu's decision to join the team or to commit to the class, but it's actually the academics and kind of the structure. She even said, he knows he can go to any school and be successful and develop as a wide receiver, but it was really the structure of Alabama they have as far as the support and everything they have in place for the student athletes, which I thought was really interesting. So really good read, and I think he's a guy that can come in and get some significant playing time next year in his freshman year.
Yeah, you can find that update, that outstanding update right now available to Bama Online subscribers right now at BOL. Hank, as we let you go, So what's next leading up to the early signing period? I guess obviously you got a road game this week at Auburn, so that's kind of out of the mix. But then I would think a couple of hectic weeks for the Alabama staff leading up to that period.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. There's only 2 weekends that they're going to have a chance to have visitors on campus. And, for the teams that are in the SEC championship game, they only have 1 weekend on the 13th to 15th. So it's definitely going to be a lot of cramming. Bama has the luxury of kind of being able to split it up a little bit. December 6th through 8th, I think several commitments will be back in town for official visits. Obviously, Javion Cohen, the Auburn offensive tackle commit, he'll be there. But it looks like that big weekend is going to be the 13th through 15th for Alabama. They've got several guys that have already confirmed. Like I said earlier, Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that's looking to go that weekend. Brian Robinson, another wide receiver target we haven't really talked a whole lot about, that actually I'm not sure has been to Alabama yet. And he's circled that 13th through 15th weekend as well. Josh Eaton, another cornerback target of Alabama's, he's planning to be in town. So 2 pretty big weekends heading up to that early signing period that Bama's going to try to take full advantage of.
There you go. Hank South does an outstanding job covering recruiting for BamaOnline.com. If you're interested in any and all happenings as it relates to Crimson Tide recruiting, Hank South, Tim Watts, the rest of the crew there at BOL do an outstanding job. Thanks a lot, Hank.
No problem. Thanks, Travis.